All right. We are live with the illustrious Law and Lumber Rob, returning for a kind of a new Thursday gig that we have going. And I'm bringing back a guest I've had on multiple times. And really, Manny Grossman here he's my go-to guy for Son of Sam and everything related to Son of Sam and killers around Yonkers from the 70s on, pretty much, because I can't think of anybody who has put more actual legwork into discovering what's going on with the Son of Sam. And what's cool about it is I've known you long enough now to see a transition from what you thought it was to you're changing your views over time. And that's kind of an awesome thing where, we normally grab hold of something, we hang on to it. That's our pet theory. And then we do anything in the world we can to defend anybody attacking our theory. Whereas you've actually done almost a complete 180 on your theory over time. And we'll have to go into that tonight.
Definitely. Before
we do, though, I have a sponsor. I want to get that out there. And it's really cool because it's something I believe in. I always, I don't like to just sit there and do an ad read or anything else because, well, one, I don't have a perfect sonorous voice for doing an ad read and be convincing. But I happen to believe in the product because I work in IT. I have a show called America's Untold Stories, and we go into some dark stuff. I do research, and I also want to watch things from around the world. So the sponsor is ExpressVPN. And Manny, do you know what a VPN is?
I absolutely do not know what a VPN is. Eric, you're going to have to teach me.
Okay, so I'm going to make it a short lesson. I actually am happy. And by the way, folks, we're not faking it. I asked him before the show. He doesn't know what it is. So a VPN literally means virtual private network. And the function of the VPN is when you access the internet, you're connected with an IP address, which is called an internet protocol. It's like a little phone number or street address. If somebody goes to your house to deliver a letter, they find your address, right?
Got it.
Okay, well, that IP address can be used to find all kinds of things about you. Everywhere you go, you leave that address, and there's some crazy things that happen. Like, have you ever gone to look at something, and then all of a sudden you're on Facebook or something later, and you get to see ads of what you were just looking at?
Even worse, I've thought about things, and then I get ads for them, but that's a whole other story.
Okay, well, there you go. And there are some definite questions about that. So what a VPN does is it actually masks your IP address. So instead of connecting directly to the internet, you are connecting to a bank of servers, and your traffic is going through these servers, is encrypted to another server wherever you choose. They are in 94 or 96 countries, 94 countries in the world. So you can have your actual traffic coming out of a server in one of their countries, like let's say England. And there is nothing tying you to it. Now, the second part of it is really important because they have good servers and they actually don't keep logs. Because you're like, oh, well, if I hide my identity and then they just go and serve the VPN company, well, then they can find everything out about me right there. They don't keep the logs, so you aren't tracked, and they don't hold the info. So that is an important thing. You're studying some really creepy people, Manny.
Actually, I'm studying less and less creepy people as time goes on. Getting back to your point about my 180, it's really only one creepy person at this point, named David Berkowitz.
Fair enough. Anyway, so another advantage to it is if, let's say, you want to watch product that is in England. Have you ever tried to watch something and you're like, oh, you're not from this country? Sorry, you can't watch BBC because it's called geo-blocked.
It's actually never happened to me, but I've heard of that, yes.
Eric, he's killing you.
Yes.
Should I just go along with everything? I mean, I don't know what VPN is.
I don't mind at all. I mean, this is great because I'm going to talk about it and then check it out, though. I'll get some comments saying, okay, God, how long are you going to take on a pitch?
Well, it's not. I mean, there's an easy way to explain it. It's a mail forwarding service, but for your computer.
Yes. It absolutely is. And it keeps you safe. It keeps you private. And you can also watch things in other countries for other geocodes, things like that. I find it a very useful tool. And as an example, anyone who lives in China pretty much has to use a VPN because they can't go on Facebook or anything else because everything's blocked. So they use the VPNs to get out. So if you want to stay private, want to stay secure, consider getting an ExpressVPN. And guess what? Of course, I have a link in the description where you can get 3 months for free. And it does help a lot. So everybody, thank you for the indulgence. I really do believe completely in VPNs though. And it's really super easy to use. So now on to the subject of the day. Now, when I first met Manny, it was around the time that Netflix came out with their show Sons of Sam. Sons of Sam Cult, which I was like, what the hell? Sons of Sam? I have no idea. And this is based on a book by Maury Terry called Ultimate Evil. And it essentially tied the Son of Sam murders to devil worshiping cult out of Yonkers, tied to like another cult in England that traced over to Charles Manson and crew in California. Is that a fair?
Yeah, you're also forgetting to throw in North Dakota in there as well. There was that. There was that also other connection that was made as well to North Dakota. And yeah, you're absolutely right. When I first started this, Eric, I was a true believer in the Ultimate Evil. In fact, that's why I started my video series. I started it mainly as a way to bring that book to life for the audience. It was such an influential book to me as a true crime lover and as a local person to the Yonkers area. I grew up in the Bronx, but that's just south of Yonkers. I'm literally 3-4 miles away from where Berkowitz was living right now. And it was just the connection I had to this case. And but yeah, I was absolutely a true believer in in Maury Terry's cult thesis, and that's why I started this video series, because I felt that he didn't give enough time to the visual aspect. The picture section was horrible, and really that's all it started out. I never meant to investigate. I never meant to basically change the entire paradigm of the story, which is what has happened over the last year and a half.
Now, Rob, have you heard of any of this, Son of Sam or whatever? Because I want you to jump in and say, hey, what, at any point.
So Son of Sam, yes. And just a little, not a warning, but when you told me we were doing Son of Sam, I may have just like put a bunch of podcasts on at like 2x speed, trying to catch up on facts, not remembering anything about this case and trying to figure out what the heck was going on. I remember the wigs. I remember the 44 cal. I remember the close proximity shootings, and I remember the newspapers and the articles that ran. So yeah, you're going to get a whole lot of what the hell's going on.
Okay, good. And I want you to do that. And feel free to interrupt. I'm expecting the chat will have some questions. I'm hoping to make it not a complete free-for-all, but definitely get involvement from people, because this has been a journey. You have the traditional Son of Sam, which is it's funny how it came around, because I feel like I've had some minor influence with Manny on this. I don't know.
Oh, big time influence, not minor, big time.
But it really is a pedestrian serial killer. Now, obviously, every serial killer is a monster and people die, obviously. But I'm saying there really is a standard fare that they escalate, people die, usually one person, almost always white male. There's a lot of factors that are pretty common. And the Maury Terry book, though, took this kind of seemingly boring thing and said, oh, wait a minute, nothing makes sense here. It wasn't one person who did these killings. It, in fact, was a team of people, and they all had their own 44 caliber guns.
Or they passed it around themselves. And not only was there this team working, but they were also under the thrall of a larger cult, and that cult was under the thrall of a larger cult. I mean, it was endless.
Whatever
and
stupid.
Well, thank you very much, Rob. And that's the thing that I'm fighting against the tide the most. But we've had a lot of influence over the last year, Eric, and really no serious Son of Sam researcher believes in the cult theory anymore. But the issue mainly from the beginning of this case was that NYPD wrapped it up so quick, right? And there were questions that people had, and mainly dealing with rather pedestrian things like, hey, the sketches didn't match. But, people didn't realize back then, and people don't realize now, police sketches are almost useless for identification purposes. So that's not even something that people should have worried about. But yet NYPD wrapped it all up so quickly.
Well, they had to, because there were some shenanigans, because they had a bad search warrant.
Correct.
The whole thing could have been thrown out. So David Berkowitz may not have been convicted at all, because they saw his car, went into his car, found the guns and everything, then closed the car and got a search warrant. So totally broke the law, and probable cause, everything, fruit of the poisonous tree. Rob, correct me if I'm wrong. Big problem.
I'm not correcting you when you're wrong. What I'm doing is now just panicking, going, I need that. I want to find those facts. I'm going to go find those facts.
Well, luckily, Rob, I can help you. Maybe not now, but we have all the police documents, all this FOIA search, all the search warrant documents, all of that stuff, and I can send that to you if you're interested. But and even worse, Eric, I'm going to tell you something that we just learned last week. We learned that he got a moving violation the night of one of the shootings for, hear me out, driving it without insurance. So in reality, the cop just let him go, didn't run him, didn't stop, didn't do anything really, and they just let him go. They gave him a moving violation, but in reality, he should have had his car impounded, and they should have done all this, all the stuff that they should have done. And that was the night of a shooting. That was April 17th, 1977.
I understand that, though. Ironically, they probably were like, hey, we got other business on hand other than this BS thing. So I can sort of see
all
both
hindsight
sides.
2020, correct?
Yeah.
But NYPD definitely wanted to wrap it up, and truth be told, YPD wanted to wrap it up too. There were mistakes made all around. There were cultural issues that were extant in the police departments, and the truth was they actually did have their man, and they wrapped it up quick. But what that did was it gave people like Maury Terry just enough rope, to essentially hang himself, as we're finding 45 years later. But in reality, what happened was he took these little questions, these little things, and he started doing some research. And boy, what a mistake that was, because he started out with an erroneous premise. He looked in the phone book and he saw John Wheat Carr. And instead of realizing that was two names, he said to himself, oh, there's John Wheaty's car. That means John Carr was involved with Son of Sam. And that led to the whole
John Carr was a neighbor, and knew Berkowitz very likely.
Oh,
No,
we didn't even know him. Okay.
We have now since discovered that Berkowitz found these people out of the phone book. He moved to the neighborhood, started wigging out about their dog, and then looked them up in the phone book, found all their names, and then started obsessing over them. He started writing about John Wheat Carr. John Wheat wasn't even a person. It was John Carr and Wheat Carr. Their name was just together in the phone book. But instead, he put them together and he thought it was one person, showing that he didn't know these people. He admitted he didn't know these people. We have it in his own writing that he didn't know these people. But yet, Maury Terry took this and he crafted, basically around that one phone book entry, a conspiracy theory that, as you said earlier, involved the process, which then could involve MI6, right, and Tavistock, and then you have Charles Manson, and then you have all of these disparate crimes coming together. It's just insanity.
MI6,
because the process is out of England. It's
intelligence operation,
coven, or I don't know how to explain. Witchcraft, Satanists, some variant.
But a lot of people, but Rob, a lot of people believe that these cults that came out of the 60s were, and I'm willing to go down this road too, but they were creations of intelligence services to wreak havoc on society for whatever reason. Now,
Charles Manson's a really interesting case in that regard.
We're going to be doing Jolly West. That actually is a legitimate case with Jolly West and all that, but that's a whole nother story.
It's a whole other story.
I've had Tom O'Neill on, folks, if you're interested. Tom O'Neill wrote Chaos. I've had him on the show. Check out the catalog. Very good book. There's a lot of things on Manson. However, Manson is actually far more interesting in some ways than David Berkowitz.
Totally more interesting. Although we're finding Berkowitz to be a rather interesting character in his own right, but no, not on the order of Charles Manson. Definitely not. So Maury took this little error of his, really an error. He crafted this huge conspiracy theory around it, wrote this very influential book in '87 called The Ultimate Evil, which unfortunately really poisoned minds. Okay, myself included. I got to make sure the audience understands that I was a big time believer in this book. I believed almost everything in it. But what happened, Eric and Rob, once I started walking around Yonkers, I realized pretty quickly that nobody in Yonkers ever heard of a cult in Untermeyer associated with Son of Sam. Nobody in Yonkers ever heard of the group called the Children or the 22 Disciples of Hell. Nobody ever heard of this. People who knew the Cars were like, they're nice people. They didn't know Berkowitz. What are you even talking about? And it was these little things that little cracks in the armor of the conspiracy story that gave me just enough room to go in and explore more. And the things that we have found really have shattered it. And as you said earlier, brought us back really 180 to the original lone gunman theory. But of course, the lone gunman theory of the NYPD is problematic too, because it rests on Berkowitz being ordered to kill by a dog, and that wasn't true either. This was just a crazy, disturbed loner kind of kid who, as you said earlier in one of our previous broadcasts, Eric, escalated this. And we're doing a series of shows now called Psychiatric Sunday, where we get into his own letters and the writings that he wrote to his psychiatrist, and they're extremely telling. He tells in detail how he did every shooting, why he did it, how he did it, the planning that went into it, the fact that he was planning these for years, and it was very meticulous. He kept his car in perfect order. I mean, the story that's emerging is actually really, really interesting, and it's never been told before. And that's what's so exciting about doing my video series.
Yeah, you've done great work with that. And by the way, Rob, just to give you an idea of the scope, Maury Terry's book, I believe, was reprinted 3 times.
Oh my God.
Major. It was a major bestseller. It's like up there with Ann Rule stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
and each time, sorry, Rob, go ahead.
Oh no, it kind of leads into that point. Like when I was reviewing this case or just taking a look at the case, I think part of the thing that I found so curious about it was the media coverage of it. I mean, they stirred up everyone into a freaking panic.
Well, people were freaked out, dude, for a reason.
I get it. But here's the thing: like if you take every single person that he killed, right? That is a Friday evening in Chicago.
You are right about that. And in fact, the woman was just shot on the street of Union Square today in a very similar type attack. Walked up to on the street at 5 a.m. and just shot right in the head. And no one knows who did it or why. And so you are right. But, back in the 70s.
I mean, I've interviewed Carl, God, I forgot his last name.
Denaro.
We both have. And Carl Denaro is a survivor. He had his bullet in his head.
Right.
And it's hard to, get around some of that, just the randomness of if you're a female of a certain age, or in case of Carl, a male with long hair, who could be mistaken, and you just happen to be driving and it's just in your neighborhood and you could catch a bullet. That's scary. I mean, I can see,
I'm not, I wasn't disputing that. I was trying to tie it back to the book and the publicity that these things get, and the desire to create this massive conspiracy. I mean, it's the boom in true crime podcasts. Then there's good ones, there's bad ones. There's good ones that just, they go in and they look at a case and they read the bullet points on Wikipedia, and then they basically say, well, I'm going to connect the dots this way. And it's completely irresponsible, and it has people thinking about all this stuff. But when you've got a newspaper or a book that goes out and runs with this massive conspiracy theory or these crazy massive questions, anyone else who's out there who is, Berkowitz, this guy, he's like a textbook sociopath. Like everything about him.
Mm-hmm. I think it's the triad.
Absolutely.
Wet beds, started fires, and did bad things to animals.
Right.
You could really write a diagnostic test based on his persona.
I mean, he talks about in his letters to a psychiatrist about how basically every day of his life he went out and did some sort of cruel or criminal act, some sort of vandalism. He was even talking about how he loved crushing his friend's mother's matzahs, for crying out loud. He was the crusher of matzah bread. So this guy was into these cruel little acts. He killed his parents' bird, and so on and so forth, started innumerable fires. And he also did something that I think was also extremely important to understand. I just say it in 3 words, that Berkowitz was known to roam. This guy would drive everywhere. He would walk everywhere. As a kid, he would take his bike up 15, 20 miles up to Connecticut. So this was a guy who was very well versed in the roads, the roadways of New York City, very, very into roaming around. And he talked about how he would often stalk people to kill, and it didn't work out that night because there was a cop there or somebody was on the street. So there could have been a lot more victims actually than there was. And in fact, I'm working now with an ex-Yonkers police detective, and we're convinced that Berkowitz has more bodies. We just did a major video. It came out last week, and we ran a timeline, and there's a 6-month gap where nothing really happens, but yet he has guns. And it's an interesting video. You guys should really watch it. But it's called Mike Lorenzo, New Theories. And but we're now thinking that he has more bodies, and we're thinking now that he was the Dart Man of Westchester. There was a very famous case pre-Son of Sam of a guy going around shooting darts at women in Westchester. Yeah, in Westchester neighborhoods, very, very close to where Berkowitz was living. Those attacks stopped when Son of Sam started. And all of those attacks line up right now, as far as we can tell, to when he was in those areas. So we're now working on another video with a former Westchester DA who's of the same opinion. And so, exciting things are happening now in the Son of Sam space, because we have demolished this albatross on our neck, which was this conspiracy theory crap. And I have to say, and I'm sorry for talking so long, that I'm still a conspiracy theorist, right? You talk to me about the big conspiracies of the day, I'm with you. But when it comes to true crime, and especially Son of Sam, which is the one that I've dived into the most, there's no place for it. These were crimes committed by individuals for real reasons, and there's forensics involved, and there's real things that can be proven in a court of law. And I just am so sick and tired of what I call
stopped.
They stopped, exactly.
That's a big deal.
Right. We interviewed the Netto family, the famous Netto family on Wicker Street, where he actually started Son of Sam there, I believe, before the shootings. He was shooting their dogs. He was throwing Molotov cocktails at their house, writing them all sorts of nasty letters peppered with satanic terminology. And this was before the attacks, the Son of Sam attacks. Those attacks stopped too the night he was arrested. So, the people got to come to grips with the fact that, we were lied to by a true crime writer named Maury Terry. And because of that, he just really poisoned a lot of people's minds, and also, more importantly, way of thinking. There's still people to this day that cannot get their heads around the fact that we were lied to by this guy. I've done a million shows showing you exactly how he did it, but still, we're beyond it at this point. We're on to new stuff, new theories, new origin stories.
Manny has a fan club.
Oh, I do? Well, I have both for sure.
Yes, people that are very concerned. Manny lives rent-free in some people's minds.
Big time.
Oh,
I have people
liar enough, and you live rent free. Yeah, that happens.
It's gotten to the point, Eric, where I'm just like a normal dude from the Bronx who, pretty much everyone knows my story. I lost all my business during the beginning of the Corona thing. Because I didn't want to play along with it. I lost everything. I lost my career, and I had to start this new thing. And just basically to stave off severe depression, essentially. But this has morphed now into people making videos where my father is now Berkowitz's military intelligence handler, who was steering Berkowitz, and were connected to the North Fox Island child sex abuse case because there was a guy named Grossman there. This is the level of discourse that happens amongst the I call them conspiratards at this point, because they just make connections. Everything's connected.
Speaking of which, everyone, I'm going to just ask right now, please consider subscribing to Manny's channel. He's at 985 subscribers. So getting over 1,000 is a really big deal for YouTubers. Manny had a channel. He got so burned out with all the attacks and everything. He kind of surprised me, and all of a sudden, it was literally, I think, 1 or 2 days after you did our last interview.
Yeah, I shocked
everything.
I quit everything.
He burned down the channel, so he's rebuilding. And if you guys don't mind, and if you like this topic and you like the subject, head over, give him a subscribe. Secret McSquirrel just put in the chat. You can click on his name in the description. And it's really easy. help him get over the 1,000. So then that
He
way he
is.
start earning a little money.
I appreciate that.
If he looks at his back end right now, because I was number 996 on the front end.
That'd be great.
There's 1K. Good.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate that. Now I can actually start making a little bit of money again. It's funny because in my previous iteration, I had like 7,000 subscribers. I had 700 paid subscribers per month. And yeah, Eric is correct. I reached a point where just of extreme burnout, like mental and physical burnout, I was destroying my relationships at home, and coupled with the fact that I had been very burned by a partner of mine, somebody who I thought was a very close ally, ended up basically shivving me in the back, and it was a very nasty scene, and I just lost all hope, and I said, F it. I'm just burning this to the ground. And a week later, I realized, wait a second, I'm bored. I need something to do. I was actually good at this, and I enjoyed it, so I started it back up again. So we started fresh, but actually, I'm glad I did that, guys, because then I wanted to be able to control the narrative in a sense, not in the terms of like dictating the story, but as you say, Eric, I went from the biggest believer to the biggest critic, and I felt that my old channel didn't really give the story of that adequately. So I felt like those old videos, if people just watch them on their own, they're going to get a really false impression. So what I did was I'm bringing all those videos back now, but I'm doing what's called Manny Reflects, where I'm watching the videos in real time. Right. And I'm telling the story about, where my head was at that time. Because you're right. I am now Maury Terry's biggest worldwide critic. I know everything what that guy did wrong. I can show it to you, and I can prove it in a court of law at this point. So it's been a great run.
Well, so Manny, to that point, because I was getting on that a little bit, like that. I was going to say, why do we name these guys? But that's one of the problems. Why do we name them? Why do we give them these glorified names? Because it just encourages other people, and it also minimizes the actual victims of a violent criminal.
You mean
the second part is?
You mean the moniker "Son of Sam"?
The Son of Sam.
Okay.
And I get why we did it, but they were calling him the 44 caliber killer,
right?
Before he gave himself that moniker.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was going to say. He named himself.
He did, and the thing is, you publicize it, you give them the opportunity to give themselves a name, and they're just going to keep on going, and it just minimizes and destroys the victims. It increases the fear element here, and then every one of these books that gets published that goes down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole, it glorifies this stuff.
I can see why. I'm going to give you my opinion on it, which take it or leave it, whatever way. I agree with you 100% when you're talking about a school shooter, because the incentive is to get their name out. When you're talking about a serial killer who's out there and is continuing to do it, a lot of this is to get them to talk, get them to communicate, get them to fuck up, if you will. Excuse my language, but that's literally that's what I know. But I try to keep it down. You are trying to get them to trip up. So sometimes you're going to stroke that ego, then you're going to poke at it, you're going to do whatever, because if you aren't communicating with them, and if they're if they're quiet and they're underground, they can get away with a lot. I forget. I think it's Otis O'Toole or something has like over 100 kills to his name. There's a guy, Grim Sleeper, who has like 89. So these people who are just killing anonymously, where nobody realizes, hey, there's a killer out there. Especially for people who are suffering in society, who let's say are having a bad time of it, prostitutes or people who are forgotten, etc. They could get the word out too amongst each other. Look out, there's something going on. And so that publicity, while I agree in the glorification, is horrible. These are serial killers. They are going to kill whether they get a big name or they don't get a big name. So by putting the moniker out there, getting the interest up, maybe you can identify them quicker, and then hopefully move them to obscurity.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, also people don't realize that back in the 70s, you could commit crimes like Berkowitz did with impunity, because there was no cameras, there was no easy pass to check you when you crossed over the bridges, which he did. I mean, he'd never be able to do no DNA. He could never do this today. But yeah, absolutely. But I do want to point out that he did name himself, which is very important. But he loved the notoriety. This guy was into it. He was playing this cat and mouse game with the cops. He was sending them letters. He was sending letters to Jimmy Breslin. Letters with tons of clues in them, by the way, as to his location.
Exactly.
Right. And he was an extensive letter writer, and I've done shows because that was one of Maury Terry's things. Oh, he didn't write the Son of Sam letters. Oh yeah, well I have 3 videos proving that he actually did. But in either case, it is a double-edged sword, and it is one of these things like, did the publicity create more problems than it solved, or did it help push him out of the woodwork? It's hard to say. Ultimately, it was a parking ticket that was his demise. But he writes in his psych letters that he always planned to get caught. He was not doing this to stay anonymous. He wanted the world to know that I am doing this. He says in his letters, and please excuse my language, but he says, you fucked me over, and now and now I'm getting back at you. Like I'm basically
Cain, like Jordan Peterson loves to go into. He was like Cain.
Yes.
Striking out, and you did the world. I'm punishing you back.
Right, the first killer. Right, Lord of Life, in control of everything. I mean, this guy's very interesting to analyze, and that's what's the travesty of Maury Terry. He could have written the most interesting book about just what's going on in Yonkers, and just what was going on in Berkowitz's mind. But instead, he brought in this whole thing. People believed it for a while. Some people still do. But now it's a house of cards that have just completely fallen in on itself.
Oh, for sure. And another weird example, Rob, is I think that he wanted to get caught too, just like I think BTK wanted to get caught. Because that's an interesting guy who was totally undiscovered, right? And then he had to just start writing letters again. And I think it was like a matter of, I want everybody to know who I am because I'm this spectacular killer. And I feel like Son of Sam was kind of heading that way too, or Berkowitz was.
I was going to say it drew a comparison for me to Winston Mosley, Kitty Genovese. He essentially had a lot of those sociopathic tendencies and was just going to commit acts of violence. He had been escalating to acts of violence. And basically he was just going to continue doing it until he was caught. He did it so openly and so brazenly, and each attempt was more and more and more out in the open and more severe and more significant. Or these guys they want to get caught at some point in time. It's crazy, the psychopathy there.
Right. And we just did a video comparing Berkowitz to the Zodiac, because one of the things we also found out was that Berkowitz was a true crime buff.
Oh yeah.
He was big time. It's funny because Maury Terry has the cult, the 22 disciples, writing all of the crazy writings that were found in his apartment. They were all done by the cult. No, Berkowitz explains it very easily. He got the idea from the lipstick killer, William Herein, who, if you look him up on Google Images, he wrote on his wall in red lipstick, "Please catch me before I kill again," and so on and so forth. This guy Berkowitz was well versed, but getting back to Zodiac, we did a video comparing Zodiac and Berkowitz, and we feel that Berkowitz was heavily influenced by the Zodiac, down to the symbol even that he did. But that Zodiac the difference was that Zodiac didn't want to get caught, and Berkowitz did. And that was the main difference. And of course, Zodiac has never been caught. And I think it goes back to he didn't want to.
I think Zodiac's probably dead.
I never,
going by the age and everything else. I think
it would make sense. Yeah. I never got into that case, honestly. I got into Son of Sam because it was a personal thing. I was hanging out in my friend's apartment. His father was a fireman in Yonkers in the 70s, and he was in Berkowitz's apartment a couple days before the arrest, and he said that it was pristine. It was clean. There was nothing on the wall. And that, of course, started my whole interest in this case. That was 1993, and I never stopped. I wanted to write screenplays, I wanted to write books, but ultimately it all worked out for the best. And I'm very happy that I have unburdened at least the Son of Sam community from the complete albatross around the neck that is the ultimate evil. It's a complete waste of time, zero-sum game. If you guys anybody who continues to use that book as a resource, essentially it's a circle jerk. That's what I call it. It's the circle jerk.
Well, let's go back to it and get a chronology, I guess, because I was thinking about it's like we're talking around it, and there's a lot of cursive knowledge that's happening here.
Of course, yes.
So let's go back. So the original case, as we put it, was pretty much you have a guy, he killed people random people at
Right.
night, essentially, whoever was conveniently out, and he could find them, and if he crossed their paths, he shot them.
And the conditions were correct. That's the important thing. He said there were many nights that the conditions weren't right, and there was no kill that night.
Okay. Now then, he ultimately was caught. The way he was caught was a parking ticket, and I think, for some reason, Mike Levine actually is the one who suggested to the cops that they look for a parking ticket.
Well,
I had him on the DEA agent.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because now 40 years later, everybody caught David Berkowitz, right? But the story that went around was that there was a woman who witnessed it named Cecilia Davis, who witnessed the cops giving a ticket that night, and that she called her friends on the police force, who then did it. And maybe one of those people was Mike Levine. I mean, I love Mike Levine. I used to listen to him like crazy back in his WBAI days. I forget what the name of his show was, but he was very impressive, and I used to love listening to him. So, I'd love to speak to him about that again. But yeah, he was, and just the fact that he got a parking ticket the night he shot somebody, that speaks to wanting to be caught. I mean, I don't know about you, but if I was the son of Sam, and I didn't want to be caught, I wouldn't be parking at a fire hydrant.
Right.
Sometimes it's the crazy things. So Manny, I might have a job. I might have a job for you if you're bored with the son of Sam.
Oh yeah.
Not a job, another passion project. Leopold and Loeb. They got caught because of a dumb mistake. 2 dumb mistakes. Really dumb mistakes that you wouldn't think that would lead to them being caught. They got caught because glasses fell off on their way out after taking their victim and putting him in the sewage drain pipe. And they got caught because they thought they had the perfect plan. They didn't keep it simple. I mean,
right.
They didn't want to get caught, and they were also true crime buffs. And you wonder about whether Son of Sam looked at Leopold and Loeb from the 1920s and was like, well, I love this stuff so much. I just want to do this. I don't know.
He might have. I mean, his influences seem to come more from the true detective magazines of the 50s and 60s. And I think that and maybe someone's done this already, but someone really ought to do a study on the effect of those magazines on the psyche of the American male.
Oh, it's been done.
Okay, because those magazines conflated sex with murder, and it was really something very disgusting if you think about it.
Oh, a lot of things did, dude. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, that's always running, and some of those studies that they did have caused more problems by just trying to tamp down things. I mean, those same type studies created D&D causing Satanism. And it's like Dungeons and Dragons is a bunch of nerds who are pretending to be knights. You're rolling dice.
I tried that in the 80s, and I was like, yo, this is for dweebs. This is not cool. It's not fun.
Take it easy, man.
Hold on.
Sorry.
Yeah. Oh my God. He's wounding the.
No, I had never done it, and I got convinced to do it, and I love it. It's awesome.
Okay. Well, maybe at the age 50, I would change my mind. But when I was a little kid in the 80s, no.
It hurts even more. I can't even believe it.
No, what really hurts is knowing that Manny's over 50 because.
Well, no, I'm not. I'll be 50 next year.
No,
okay, he looks like he's 28.
Thank you. I appreciate
ridiculous.
That. No, my addiction is crossword puzzles. I love crossword puzzles. That's
what
I
fun because it's like the big brain thing.
It really helps with your vocabulary like crazy, and memory and articulation. It's unbelievable what these things do.
Not to go down a rabbit hole of different things. And I'm sorry, Eric, but every now you throw me curveballs, I get to throw you curveballs every now and then. Someone in the chat mentioned Lee Malvo. He came up in the news again today talking about serial killers that have a certain method and methodology.
Malvo is weird because of Muhammad, John Muhammad, right?
Right. They were the Beltway killers.
I've not figured out on Malvo though whether he was under the thrall or not under the thrall. I'm sure he enjoyed what he was doing to a certain point, but that's an interesting case too because you get some psychology, you have a teamwork, very unusual for serial killers as well.
Right. That whole period after 9/11 with anthrax and the Beltway killings, I don't know. We still need to reconvene a whole study thing on those years to figure out what was going on then.
You get your opportunity because yes, that occurred in 2003.
Oh, that was right.
2003. Yeah. And yeah, I was here during that time. 2003, but he has just now been ordered back to Maryland, the court, to be resentenced in Maryland. So the sentencing in Virginia took this entire time. He gets appealed. He appeals it up. It gets kicked back for resentencing. He still has not been fully sentenced in all the jurisdiction where he's committed the crime.
Wow, you've got to cover that, dude. That's some craziness. Actually, hopefully you'll be on the panel tomorrow, Rob. You got to bring that up.
Oh, okay. 12 o'clock.
Yeah, all the lawyers. Come on, there's some meaty topic there. That's just nuts. Okay, so we got to the parking ticket, and that's where something sketchy did happen, because the cops, and again, they didn't really expect it. He was just some dude they were looking at, and they're like, let's go look at this guy's car here. What do we have here?
Right.
And then I don't know if they saw part of the barrel of the gun or what, but they took it upon themselves to open the car. And I know there's a ton of pressure, but they opened the car, they searched the car, and they found everything. They found a freaking note in his glove box.
Yep, with the Son of Sam symbol on it and everything.
I mean, just the works. And it's like, holy shit, this is the guy. Call the radio. Oh my God, what? You went into his car? Close it. Anyway, and they did that. So because that happened, their case literally was in a toilet, because everything tied to him was in the apartment or the car. And by doing that with the car, they were tossed into all.
And let me tell you something. They tossed that apartment like crazy. They gave no thought whatsoever to crime scene investigation, securing, keeping things in the proper places. They allowed 1 million people in and out of that apartment. And by the time they were done, the pictures that they took, some of which I sent you, we don't know whether that apartment looked like that or whether it was ransacked by the police and the media. And I don't mean ransacked on purpose. I just mean them going in and, doing their thing. So yeah, there was very little thought given to proper protocol in his arrest. Zilch, actually. And they're very lucky that he decided to plead guilty, because as you say,
he went and confessed, and they were like, "Yep, okay, good, go," and they shoved it as quickly under the carpet as they could,
and then that's what opened up the little key, the little crack that Maury Terry walked through, and made his conspiracy theory plausible to people who didn't have the internet and who couldn't, and who also, recently, this past June, a whole treasure trove of documents related to the Queen's DA investigation into Son of Sam has been released. Now, the Queen's DA investigation is very important for Son of Sam researchers, because the Queen's DA in 1979, on basically I'm not going to say the orders, but influenced heavily by Maury Terry, he came there and he's like, I have this information. You got to look into this. They did the only real police investigation into the conspiracy angle, and all of these documents have been released. The person who released them was convinced that this was going to prove the cult thesis. It couldn't have done anything farther from that. These documents show that there was absolutely no cult, that Berkowitz was alone, that all of the North Dakota information was completely bogus out of the ultimate evil. The people out there in North Dakota didn't know John Carr. Now, I know we're getting to...
I'm not sure if that person thought that, because I communicated with that person.
Well, if you look at the website, it's called the People versus David Berkowitz. They give a lot of credence to the cult theory, and they talk a lot about Maury Terry and
maybe I'm looking at a different one then, because the contact I got where they released a lot, they were like, essentially they were in the government and they couldn't reveal who they were.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, because most of the government side, call it the cops and the DA and stuff, they got their guy. And they always thought they got their guy. And that's been part of the conflict, is that Maury Terry is kind of saying, no, you screwed that up. And they did screw up the search warrant and stuff.
Yeah.
And so when you screwed that up, you didn't look into the neighbors, and you came up with the whole cult thing, because there were a lot of, there's a lot of graffiti. There were pets who disappeared. There was a lot of things that were going on in the neighborhood.
There was a cult in Untermeyer Park. Absolutely. There was a cult that had been existing in Untermeyer Park for 40 years at that point. They had nothing whatsoever to do with David Berkowitz, though. It's just this weird area of Yonkers that had all these abandoned structures. And it was this perfect sociological moment where you didn't have the security cameras. You had all these abandoned spots, and you had all these rich doctors living in that area, and lawyers and judges. And,
Well, remember, that time was like Dirty Harry in San Francisco.
Right.
It was really dark.
Right, exactly.
If you're talking about this, late 60s through the mid 70s.
We're talking about the 50s.
Well, I know, but then you keep going and going and going. You get to Ford in 75,
Right.
New York dropped dead. Go ahead.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Time out. Is there an argument that the search warrant should have been extended to the neighbors? Is that the argument they're trying to make?
No. The Maury Terry brought in all of the neighbors, particularly a family called the Carr family.
He said it was a crew. It wasn't David Berkowitz alone. It was David Berkowitz really was a schlub. And Berkowitz played this too. He was kind of a schlubby guy. And he wasn't the mastermind. The mastermind behind this was John Carr, whose father was Sam, thus the son of Sam. And John Carr had a dog, and there were problems with the dog. Now, John Carr, this is where it got really crazy, though, because John Carr was actually in the Air Force.
This is where it gets crazy?
Well, I'm just telling you. Okay, John Carr was in the Air Force in North Dakota, and then there was a woman, and the whole Ultimate Evil starts off with a woman who is murdered. Right, who was murdered in California.
Right.
And that ties it to North Dakota, to John Carr. And John Carr was supposedly doing Satanism in North Dakota when he was stationed there. Minot, or I don't remember.
And he was great friends with Berkowitz and all that. Right.
Supposedly. Right. And I pushed on Manny about that one, saying you need to get somebody to find the DD-214s and find John Carr's leave records and whatever to see if he was actually in New York. But then John Carr died within like a year,
6 months of Berkowitz's arrest.
Yeah, I mean, it was very soon.
You can't ask him any questions or verify any.
Right, but it was weird circumstances. And then his brother died as well.
Yeah, and he ran off the road. And these are unfortunate, and of course fueled the conspiracy theory like crazy, because it's very easy for someone with low intellect and low information to say, the brothers died under mysterious circumstances. They were involved. No, in fact, I've spoken to many people who, one guy who knew Michael Carr very well said he was the nicest guy. I've spoken to Wheat Carr extensively.
You've spoken to Wheat now?
Yeah, okay. Wheat and I have actually a long-term, I'm going to say friendship. I'm not sure if she would agree with me, but I'm going to say it's a friendship. And if I email her, she'll email me back. And at this point, I have literally thousands of emails from Wheat Carr explaining to me exactly where John Carr was and Michael Carr and all that kind of stuff. She's been very open.
Wow, you've gone a long way, because you've been talking to her since I've talked to you.
Yeah, I just keep it secret for the most part. My agreement with her is that I don't publicize what we talk about, because that's the way she speaks to me. And because I don't think she was involved, I'm not really, worried about not publicizing what she says. And And what I think happened was that Maury Terry, I call him the accidental genius. John Carr was probably no angel. By all accounts, he was involved in his own criminal stuff, drug dealing, drug trafficking between New York and North Dakota. He didn't know Berkowitz. But
Rob, go ahead, Rob.
Who cares? Who cares? Like,
right.
and it's that's the point, I guess. Is why? How does that matter anything more than my neighbor does these terrible things, therefore I must be a serial killer? No, it's the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Like,
totally,
make connections anywhere.
And even Berkowitz says it too. We just did a show on our last Psychiatric Sunday where I read a letter from Berkowitz saying that he calls it this cult business in Westchester, and he says there was no cult. I didn't know John Carr, and all of this stuff probably came about from a series of coincidences and erroneous information. And so Berkowitz wrote that in 1980. I wish I had known that he had written that. It took the Queen's DA dump this past June for me to learn that as a Son of Sam researcher. But Maury Terry knew all this stuff because he references these writings of Berkowitz's obliquely in his book. He references them. And Rob's great today. And his Rob's reaction is exactly the one that I was hoping to get.
It's why you listen to Berkowitz. Why listen to him at all? It's like H.H. Holmes. H.H. Holmes, America's first serial killer, right? Pathological liar, con artist like no one other, and a true sociopath to the nth degree. He gets arrested, gets charged, and all of a sudden he has all of this wealth of information to provide. And he loves to provide information and draw connections and say, this is this, and this is this, and there's these conspiracies. H.H. Holmes was the master at creating this. It was a load of crap. It was a load of crap. He's doing it to keep himself famous, to keep himself in the relevance.
Like Rob, you are so on point with this. Let me tell you something. Berkowitz and Holmes have a lot in common. Berkowitz used people on the outside. First, it was Dr. David Abramson, his psychiatrist. He used him to stay relevant in the public eye. He was like, you have to tell the public that I'm sane. I'm perfectly normal. Anybody could have done this. And he writes him 1,000 letters telling him every detail of all the crimes and so on and so forth. When Abramson tires of Berkowitz, the next person he goes to is Maury Terry. And his first letter to Maury Terry is the same. You have to convince everybody I'm sane. I'm sane, everyone. And then Maury Terry fills this guy's head. Maury Terry gave him all the answers in terms of, if you look at their interviews.
I wish I had that queued up, Rob, and we may have to revisit and cover it. But Maury Terry's interview was despicable, and that was something I pointed out with Manny way back when, because I did a little research. I was looking. I was like, okay, he is not asking questions. He's giving answers. He literally was injecting every bit of information into the interview. Like, you knew John Week Carr was doing such and such, right?
And then Berkowitz's pat answer was like, yeah.
You didn't kill such and such, right? No.
So, I mean,
totally leading.
Eric, you live close enough to DC that you should know. So the DC two-step, or the DC name drop. And this guy, Maury Terry, right? They get it right?
Yeah. Maury Terry.
These guys, they sound a lot like politicians or Hill staffers. Staffers on the Hill love to tell you about all the connections they have and all the information they have, because what they trade in is a wealth and knowledge of information. They like to have exclusive information. Having that little bit of knowledge that they believe is unique and possessed only by them gives them this grandiose sense of self. They are thou important. And for so long as they hold that small piece of information that other people don't have, they have this heightened sense of themselves. Well, once that small piece of information gets out, now they've lost self-worth. So they have to go and they have to take that small piece or exaggerate it, or they have to take it and they have to find another spin on it, because they have lost all of their identity by sharing that information. Once the information gets disclosed, that's the end of the story. But not for these people. They can't do it. They can't live that way. They have to then go back to that story and they say, but wait, there's more, because there always has to be more. And this, I'm guessing this is pure speculation. I haven't read any of it, but everything you're telling me just sings so true to this guy.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just have to say that was brilliant, because you don't know Maury Terry, and you're clearly coming from this from a layman's perspective, Rob, but you just basically encapsulated Maury Terry to the T. This guy held information. He didn't let anybody know anything. In fact, literally by the end of his life, he was holed up in his parents' attic, living as a hermit, with people begging him, please show us your files. Please show us it. No, not showing you anything. You want to be worthy? You have to go through this riddle to find out an answer. I'm going to write a 9-part riddle for you to figure out, and then maybe I'll give you a clue. I've documented all this stuff on my site. It's unbelievable how apt that description was by Rob. Now Rob's my new favorite person.
He's Rob's everybody's favorite person. Everybody loves Rob.
It's narcissistic personality. It's those traits. It's those traits.
But what's crazy is that Maury Terry, the narcissist and the narcissist personality, found the perfect person who was equally as narcissistic in David Berkowitz.
Berkowitz is a sociopath. Berkowitz as a sociopath. Berkowitz gets off on the power itself over people.
Yes.
And by having someone who feeds on the information, Berkowitz knows he can control this person. And the exercise and the control is what gets Berkowitz going. Again, just speculation. It's just me putting my 2 cents together. Berkowitz enjoys control. Maury is the tool. Maury thinks that he's getting the better end of it, which is what actually is pleasing to Berkowitz.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. I mean,
well, it's like Ted Bundy.
Perfect.
I mean, watch Ted Bundy's interview before he died. I mean, Ted Bundy was trying to trade information. I mean, he was saying, hey, I could probably help you with the Green River Killer guy. 2 reasons. 1, he wanted to stay alive. And 2, he didn't like the guy getting more kills than he had. There was a great, I saw, but I listened to, it was hilarious, about Charles Manson, and Charles Manson was griping about Ted Bundy, like that Ted Bundy's just and they know about each other. They all do.
Right.
It is it's kind of like a law tube, right? You know, serial killers and law tube.
You know
each other.
Why don't we do that? Let's draw that connection.
Because it's fun.
You know, but the real danger here, though, is that Maury was playing a really nasty game, because he put, getting back to the point of Berkowitz as schlub, Berkowitz actually wasn't a schlub. If you read Berkowitz's writings, he was far from a schlub. He was meticulous. I mean, this guy was on point, and he was a murderer and a psychotic murderer, and in creating this whole mythos of a cult and Berkowitz just a patsy, he turned Berkowitz into a victim of the Son of Sam just as much as the people who were shot. And that to me is just disgusting. And that's one of the things that I want to really fight against. Is we got to realize, as I call it, the Son of Sam community, that Berkowitz was not a victim. He was a psychotic killer who did these things. And in fact, he talks about that in his letters. He writes,
he is a psychotic killer.
He is. He's
still alive.
He writes about that in his letters to his psychiatrist. He writes specifically, now I'm paraphrasing, but it was something along the lines of, I love my face because people look at me and think I'm a nice guy. I'm able to fool everybody with this face of mine. And I think he really used that to his advantage.
Good point, Ray J. Berkowitz wrote everything like he was writing a detective mag.
True.
That makes sense.
And he loved his detective mags.
The linguistics of his letters are also remarkably intelligent.
He's a brilliant writer.
Smart dude. You know, that's the problem, is that I think in society we have a problem with just because somebody's a monster doesn't mean they're dumb. Like, you have to recognize evil on its own grounds. If they're smart, they're smart. If they're brilliant, they're brilliant. I mean, the perfect case, and I talk with Greg Hartley about this all the time, of the behavior panel. But people get very upset when you point out that 9/11 was brilliant. It was one of the most brilliant operations in history. That's the truth. They were monsters. It's unbearable, and there's a special place in hell for all of them. All true. But you have to step back and say, that was brilliant. And then you have to recognize that so you can catch it. If you don't acknowledge brilliant, or you put something down, like Son of Sam, he's just a dumb schlub, blah, 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 blah. Well, then you will never able to understand or to move in the future to stop or control.
So instead of calling it brilliant, you can call it devious. That I think is the corollary to brilliant as well. It is devious in
cunning. You can call it devious.
Cunning, any number of things. There's any number of things. But yes, you're absolutely right. And Berkowitz is. I mean, how many people know who Beelzebub is? Like, just off the top of their head.
Right, Berkowitz did. Yeah, very few. Berkowitz did.
And knew the reference, and knew how to make the reference, and knew how it would fit in the context of his greater story. That's not dumb. That's brilliant.
Yeah, he had a whole collection of occult books. I mean, that's the reason why he knew about these things. He didn't need a group of people to teach him this. He was perfectly capable of doing it on his own. And, Maury Terry spends a whole chapter, 2 chapters in his book talking about a handwriting expert and how Berkowitz couldn't have written these letters, these famous Son of Sam letters. Well, I disproved that in under an hour in one of my recent live streams, showing you Berkowitz's writings that they found in his apartment that were never publicized.
Yeah, we covered that.
Right. And and we covered that. The terminology is exactly from the letters. So it's like, and letters that weren't printed in the newspaper, by the way. The Borelli letter wasn't printed, and a lot of his writings had that same terminology. So, it's just like these little slam dunk things that we've been doing on my video series for the past few months. And I think it's actually having great influence. I think that we have successfully changed people's minds. Are there people who will never listen to us? Yeah, but they're in the rearview mirror at this point. I'm speaking now to a dedicated audience of people who are with me and who realize that we all got snookered by this guy Maury Terry.
Well, like my show partner, because you talk conspiracy theories and all that. One of the issues I have with the conspiracy community, or whatever you want, is there's a tendency to say, if you believe in this conspiracy theory, that everything is a conspiracy theory. And we get into some trouble with that, because we genuinely believe that there was more involved in Lee Harvey Oswald with Kennedy. There's just the amount of evidence is staggering. You cannot turn away from it. But we also think that James Earl Ray shot Martin Luther King. Well, people get mad because they watch one episode. They're like, yeah, that fits. And then you say, yeah, but that one wasn't. Or we believe that Marilyn Monroe died of a drug overdose. It was either suicide or overdose, but she was very depressed and was really teetering at the time. And she died, like many addicts do. But that gets people very upset, because that has to be a conspiracy. So you have this problem. Son of Sam is another one.
Right.
And there is a tendency in true crime, because I think it's closely related, where you get people who do want to own that. And I've seen some of the friction against you, and I'm like, yeah, why do you want to own this killer? Do you want to own those crimes?
It's a great way to put it. Yeah, it is a great way to put it. And there's really no helping people like that. It's just they're just stuck on, well, I just say stuck on stupid, SOS. But I don't want to be so mean to these people anymore. I actually feel sympathetic towards them, because it's kind of sad to see. But yeah, I can totally, I'm a conspiracy theorist. I mean, I came to this Son of Sam topic as a person who believed in the cult. But I got to say that after a year and a half of realizing that there was no conspiracy in Son of Sam, it really makes me wonder about other true crime, right? And that's why I say now that the method that we have essentially perfected or pioneered or perfected on my channel, which is going directly to the source, going to the people who were involved, and then looking strictly at police records and police reports and these documents. That's really the best way to do this, because otherwise you just get mired. Everybody can be involved in anything. And whereas I can be like the biggest conspiracy theorist on Manson. In fact, I have a very weird thought on Manson that no one else seems to agree with. I think it was faked. I don't think that it actually happened at all. But that just shows you where I'm coming from.
Which
part? The killings. But at the same time, we don't need to go into it, though. And again, I don't want to have a fight over it.
There was just an honest curiosity. That was it.
Right. But at the same time, I am now an official. I'm with the official theory on Son of Sam because of the work I've put in. So I think that all of these true crimes, people who are researching them, you're going about it the wrong way if you're just reading books and newspaper articles. You got to go directly to the source. You got to do what the cops do. And this is what the cops gave me. It's a present that I will always cherish. Get off your ass and knock on doors, guys. I had my law enforcement friends. They were so happy with my work that they printed that up for me, and I always keep it at my desk.
All right. Well, I get a couple super chats and maybe get a few questions in here.
That'd be great.
Justin Wright sent this earlier. Not good news. Ricada got a second strike.
Are you fucking kidding me? That
means he's going to be off for, I think, 2 weeks. Next one, his channel's nuked, and this is a huge YouTuber. I'm going to have to talk to him. Hopefully I can get him on tomorrow to talk, but geez, this is sick.
Yeah, it's going to be that interview we did earlier this week.
Thank you, Mr. Steve. I appreciate that. Here's a question. Why is Manny so invested in protecting MK Ultra cults, GITD much? I don't know what GITD means, but I'm not invested in protecting them. If you give me evidence that they were involved, I'll look at it. And if they were involved, I'll be the first person to tell you they were involved. And this was MK Ultra. But, you know, at this point, I don't know what you've been listening to for the last hour, but you need more proof than just your thought, your feeling. This is where true crime has gotten into so much trouble. And Maury Terry is one of the main people responsible for this. He put conspiracy theory into true crime, and it's a mess that we have to clean up. Seriously, that we have to clean up.
I mean, this
true,
conspiracy theory and true crime. I mean, because the Lindbergh case, I do Trials of the Century every week. I do Trials of the Century stream. Charles Lindbergh kidnapping. There is tons of conspiracy theories surrounding that case.
Really? Okay.
Tons of it, that he was in on it, that he hired other people to do it, and at the end of the day, there's the primary source material. But I do want to caution you, Manny, sometimes cops are not as honest as you think they are. And sometimes they don't write the reports as well as you would want them to write.
We have definitely found that out.
Dude, we're just talking about the search warrant.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's actually known. I mean, that is public knowledge, and it's out there. So,
well, interestingly enough, Rob, what you bring up was actually one of the big controversies of my video series, because I interviewed this family called the Netto family. They were harassed by David Berkowitz starting in 1974. Okay, but officially, according to the police reports, their harassment started in 1976. So I went back to the family. I showed them the police reports. They're like, no, this is completely wrong. So it gets very interesting when you get into the whole issue of our police reports accurate, and absolutely there's problems there, and there's whole sorts of issues. Like, was the cop tired that night? Did he just want to get home because it was Christmas Eve, right? And so on. Was there translation problems because this family was speaking Spanish and Portuguese speaking, and so yeah, absolutely. And these are things that we deal with every day on our video series. But the trajectory of the case and the preponderance of the evidence at this point, and all my cop friends, the serious detectives, they came on board once I started getting away from the conspiracy and started getting into this more I think is more real stuff. They agree that we are onto something big here, and now we're on to this next step where we think Berkowitz actually had more bodies, and we want to do some cold case searches. And that's what I'm trying to get some ex-NYPD and current NYPD interested in this, because I think that I think that we could actually find more bodies with Berkowitz from the period this January 1976 to June of 1976. I think that there's more crimes there that he has never been caught for, and that to me is one of the most exciting areas of research in Son of Sam right now, because we've already done everything else. I mean, lone gunman, crazy, psychotic, official story was basically the truth. All
right. So quick thoughts about the JonBenet Ramsay case.
There's no such thing as a quick thought on JonBenet Ramsay.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, I can give you one. It's a horrible, horrible tragedy with a girl who died. I mean, that's about as far as I'm going to go. There's a lot to it. I'd recommend checking out Peter Hyatt. Peter Hyatt has done a lot of work on statement analysis from the mother, people around, etc. I don't know the case that well. John Douglas, I think, wrote about it as well. If you want to read on that, there's some great people.
John Douglas interviewed Berkowitz.
Oh, I'm sure he did.
Yeah, he was very early on in the 70s when he was in the FBI. Because
he was doing that. Well, that's what Mindhunter is. Mindhunter is based on John Douglas.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and interviewing the serial killers, Ed Kemper, Charles,
In fact, getting back to Berkowitz's mindset, just really quick, he was very impressed that the fact that the FBI came and spoke to him. He found it to be like very, he was like a big deal. He loved it, the fact that he was speaking to the FBI. Validated, very correct.
For sure. So, Rob, your hair's out of place. Oh, my.
Yeah, I have to do this thing called getting a haircut. But that requires time, and I seem to be short on that. But yes, that's on the books. I'll get it cut. That's why I wear the hat, you guys, because it's really long.
And this is Georgina. Thank you so much, Georgina. Disagreements. I haven't gone into the Manson with Manny. That'll be a side conversation most likely. But
I just got to say, I'm influenced by Miles Mathis on that. I just read an 82-page paper on him saying that they were faked and the pictures were faked and everything was faked, and it just kind of spoke to me. But I'm not saying that. Like the honest truth is, I don't care too much about any other case other than Son of Sam. So
I mean, Game of Thrones speaks to me, but I don't believe that there's Night Walkers walking around like.
Well, read the paper yourself and make up your own mind.
I'll do. I will. I actually think that's kind of cool.
I mean, yeah, send it my way.
He gets into interesting things about how Paul Tate was an intelligence officer.
I know about all that.
Right.
That ties to the cover up and things.
Right.
So it's.
And what about Sebring being a possible cover for intelligence and his hairstyling salon?
Yeah, and then the fact that oh God, what's his nose?
What's his nose?
The Polish dude was
Frykowski.
Was with Mama and
Katz. Mama Katz.
Yeah, Mama Katz.
Which then ties into Son of Sam, by the way, because
which also ties into Lennon and the CIA
right.
with the LSD.
Oh God!
Right, yeah. And you notice how whenever we speak about these things, we just say tied
what's
in.
His nose? You said what's his nose, and then you said the Polish guy, and I was going, oh my gosh! And then we're talking about Rekieta, who is the nose of all noses.
Who's Polish?
Is he Polish?
He is Polish. So there you go.
No, you know what? So Rekieta is probably involved in one of these crime conspiracy families. Definitely,
of course.
We
solved it. We solved it, dude.
We completely made that connection.
It's a Thursday night stream. Anything can happen. Yeah.
Fantastic. Now I can go to bed knowing that I have somehow solved something that was never needed to be solved.
Oh, there you go. Very glad Rob has his axe handy when talking about serial killers. Objects on point.
Oh, and Manny, remind me, I have to introduce you to my friend Scott. You guys would get along just fine.
Oh, I'm surprised Scott's not in the chat. He's been pretty good about these chats. But yeah, Scott.
I'm definitely interested for sure.
Get on a stream with Scott. You'll be talking for a while.
Okay.
In a while, but it'd be great. So actually, that could be something you guys can cover, Rob, for your the Wednesday night show.
I'm curious
about the warrant and everything.
If you ever want to talk about Son of Sam, I'm your man. I'll be there anytime.
I only have a list of historical trials of the century that is
okay. So
I'm trying to work through.
We'll talk in a couple of years.
No, I love it. I love doing these offshoots. And you know what's cool is Scott, you would really like Scott because when he does deep dives into stories, man, he goes deep. And he latches onto it. Like, and I can tell the passion that you have for this story. I know that he would go nuts on that. You guys would get along.
Hook it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would be like two obsessives.
Speaking of obsessives, you know what I did all afternoon? I was hanging out with a couple of drone operators, and we were in Berkowitz's neighborhood, and up in Yonkers today, and we sent up the drone right to his fire escape, so you could see what he looked out on, and we did all this stuff for the Son of Sam heads today, and got some great drone footage of the neighborhood. I was super excited.
Thus, everybody should be subscribing to True Crime with Manny Grossman.
Thank you.
So they can watch the drone footage.
That'll be out this weekend. Although I did put some footage out on my Twitter.
We're gonna get you to 1100, I think, dude.
That'd be amazing. Listen, every time I'm on your show, I always rock and roll with success afterwards. So I'm super happy to be back, and now we can maybe monetize a little bit, which would be great because my business still has not recovered from the human reaction to the pandemic. Let me just say.
I believe it. On that note, Manny, you'll have to obviously come back, check in
anytime.
With whatever's coming up. There's some cool side things that Manny's done too, like a earlier episode I did with him on a Nobel Prize winning scientist who, shall we say, is among the most despicable people in the world. And we have footage of him admitting what he liked to do with children.
Yeah.
So no, he owned it. He said, if a child wants to, I am all for, and he's very, very
gross.
Evil person. We covered that, and Manny, because of the Yonkers connection, Yonkers is pretty weird.
Yonkers is bonkers.
It's like everybody, people from New York said, you know what? It's just not crazy enough here. Let's go to Yonkers. It seems. I don't know. But on that note, everyone, thank you so much.
You're
Manny,
very
I'll have
welcome.
you
Thank
back.
you.
Rob, I hope to see you tomorrow and hopefully next Thursday.